This is Robert Clotworthy, and you are listening to Oak Island Plus, a discussion of Oak Island and other mysteries from around the world. Here are your hosts, James McQuiston, Oak Island theorist and author, along with John Hamels, PhD and historical researcher. Get the whole story right here, brought to you by Rabbit Hole Investigations.
My name is Fred, or is it Sam? It doesn't really matter, because I am an AI creation. I don't really exist. Even my voice is computer generated. So, how can you believe me, or anything you see anymore? Well, one thing that is certain, the older the photo or image, the more likely it is real, especially if hundreds or even thousands of people saw it, long before AI was even invented. What you are about to see is a painting from nearly 400 years ago. It's real, and it has a real story behind it, which you are about to see and hear.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Oak Island Plus. I'm Doc Hamels and this is episode 5. And with me as always is
Jim McQuiston, and we're glad to be back. We've been having some nice response. I think Doc's got some data on that.
Yeah, Jim, it is really hard to believe in the first 4 episodes we have accumulated over 10,100 views and 380 subscribers. So please, if you are interested in getting notes from us and keeping up with us, please subscribe because we do appreciate it. And you also can go to our Facebook page, Oak Island Plus, and we put little things out there from time to time. Jim, I thought that we would go back a little bit real quick for anybody this is their first time seeing us, okay?
Yes, that sounds good.
Because I think it's important that we are telling a story that no one has ever told before about Oak Island, and we would encourage you to look at the first 4 episodes before you watch this one, if you want to. But the first episode, what did we do? We talked about what we were going to do.
Yeah.
You know?
How this all came about.
And what we are not doing. And that's important because people keep saying, well, where's the treasure? We have no idea. We are telling the historical story, right? And this is based on your research.
And we're not the MTV version of Oak Island. We're the slog through the mud version. One subject at a time, one subject per episode.
Right. So in the second episode, we got our friend Art from Nova Scotia, and we talked about rocks and stones and what was the potential use of those stones, right? Which people keep asking when they watch the Curse of Oak Island, well, why are all those stones there, right?
Yeah, and there's still a lot of mystery. And by the way, Art contacted me again. He's got a bunch more hiking he did.
Oh boy.
Photos, more information. So down the road, we're going to have to pick up on that show.
So we are investigating various aspects of the story. So that was all about what are the formations on the island, and we gave you some ideas that, as we saw them and as Art saw them.
Yep.
The episode 3, we really dug into the history of Oak Island and Nova Scotia.
For that
I wasn't here. I wasn't myself that day. And we brought in Sir William Alexander, the founder of Nova Scotia. And what did he have to say?
Every word he said was something he spoke or something that was written to him or about him. It was all primary sourced information from the early 1600s.
So the backstory is very important to what we do. Why do people come to Nova Scotia, and what does it got to do with Oak Island and so forth? In episode 4, we tackled the stone, right?
Yes,
the 90-foot stone. And you brought your own perspective to that, right?
Yeah, it was, I just stumbled across a code that was a cipher, I should say, written by Mary Queen of Scots, or created by her, and it just seemed to fit. Everything was fitting, and there were only a couple of symbols on the stone that didn't match her cipher sheet, so I spent quite a while, and we came up with some ideas off that.
So we're going to be referencing from time to time things we talked about in the first episodes of our show here, and today we're going to do something new, and I brought a prop, and I didn't tell you what I brought. I brought, look at this, paintbrushes. Aha!
You're going to paint your own photo.
No, we're going to paint a story today based on what we're going to talk about, so I'm going to let you introduce why I brought paintbrushes.
Well, speaking of stumbling across things, I was looking into an old book from the 1800s, and it mentioned that there was this painting from 1634 that used to hang in this mansion in London called Audley End House and Garden. Turns out it's the model for the Downton Abbey show. And so I wrote them and I said, is this painting still hanging there? And the curator wrote me back in a while and he said, no, we don't know where it's at. And I said, well, this is a pretty substantial painting because it's the 400th anniversary of the founding of Nova Scotia. And this painting says that it has scenes from Nova Scotia. So he looked into it, and a couple months later, he had found it, and they had brought it back to Audley End, and they'd taken a high-res photo and sent a copy to me. They limited my use a little bit. I'm not allowed to publish a high-resolution version of it, but I can publish low-resolution, which is fine for a show like ours. So what happened was I used it on this particular book, Oak Island and New Ross. That's part of the painting. But that's when I first got Doc involved, because I said,
Down the rabbit hole I went.
Yeah. I said, what do you think of this painting? Do you see something in there I'm missing? Well, we found all kinds of symbolism.
Right. And if people will recall, when we looked at some pictures of the one from our last show when we were finding Masonic symbols,
yeah,
I think people will have to realize that back in the 1600s and so forth, whether it was a play, whether it was a poem, whether it was a painting, symbols, right?
And secret codes and ciphers.
Right.
They used to use this thing called acrostics, which was the first letter of every paragraph spelled out a word, a secret code, and things like that. And for one of the main reasons was because a lot of people were getting their heads lopped off. You would be, if you were Catholic, the Protestant might come along and do it to you. If you're Protestant, the Catholic might come. If you were friends of the king and you slighted him,
yep,
he might send you to the tower, and 2 days later, off with his head. So that's one of the reasons for the formation of Freemasonry, too, because they had to be secret, because there was such a threat of imprisonment or death. So, yeah, it was... We've noticed a lot of things in this painting. We're going to go one by one on these slides. So
real quick though, this painting, why are we talking about it?
Well, it was what they called an augmentation of arms, which means of the coat of arms in addition to them. Because in Britain, they take coat of arms very seriously. I mean, you have to go before what they call the Lord Lion, and they have to have a ruling on whether you can add this or that or the other thing. And so the King Charles gave an augmentation of arms to William Alexander to include elements of Nova Scotia. And one of the really interesting ones, you'll see it in the slides here, but it's the first time ever that a beaver was added to a coat of arms. And that was because he had the rights to all the beaver fur trapping in Nova Scotia. And it was a big deal back then. It was a real big deal. It was the main thing they traded First Nations Canadians for, was beaver pelts. So this Edward Norgate, he was a tremendous painter, very popular in his day. What he was noted for was painting miniatures.
Little things, yeah.
And in those miniatures, they were very accurate miniatures, and he had a technique to paint them that if you look real deep on them, you don't see the detail. But if you stand back, you see the detail. And he even wrote a book on how to do it, on how to get that technique. Well, the other thing he was noted for was accuracy. He made sure that he was accurate in what he was painting. So the painting has little vignette paintings all the way around it, and they are described as life in Nova Scotia. Well, the only time that would have happened would have been between 1628 and 1632. So we know that all those paintings are in that time period, and we also know their relative location because, as we found out in the last show, the Scots never went above the 45 parallel, even though a lot of Nova Scotia lies there. Their charter only went to the 45th, and in fact, they held back like a half a degree all the way across Nova Scotia, so they wouldn't probably get in trouble with somebody. So we know the general geography of where this all took place, and you can see their clothing, you can see what the ships look like, you can see what they did for fun. One guy has a falcon on his arm. So we thought, wow, wouldn't that be cool to just pick apart every little vignette
That we
on this
did.
photo or on this painting and
We discovered a lot. in this
discover
painting.
what they might mean.
So let's dig into it.
Okay, so we'll take a look at this first slide, and this slide is the actual painting as it looks at Audley End, and you'll notice that it's quite faded, and they don't want it to be crisper, and they really hesitated letting me make it crisper for my book, but then when I showed them what I was doing, they said it would be okay. But it's a very rare painting, and it was hidden away in a collector's vault. That's why they couldn't find it.
So we're talking almost 400 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, it will be next year. And so you can see that it is faded, and they don't want it to not be faded if it's represented as the painting. So that is the painting. So now we're going to just shift to the next slide, which
Right, we're going
what
to
I
kind
did
of
was
pick us apart little by little as we discovered it, right?
I cleaned up the basic part of the painting. So on this slide, you'll see how much crisper it looks, and that is everything that's worthwhile. The rest of it was just frame.
So we kind of zeroed in on the whole,
Yeah, on
the main painting,
And the center is actually wording,
right?
and I couldn't decipher it, but somebody did. And so I think you found the website and sent it to me. It had it all deciphered, but there wasn't anything in that gave us any real clue. It was just that, this is your territory, whatever.
This is what you can mine, this is what you
Right.
can sell, what you can buy, what you can trade, and things like that.
What gave us the clue was all these little vignettes
Right.
that you see around the outside edges of this. And that's where all the clues are. And so we decided to really focus on that as I was writing my Oak Island book. So that's the book cover there. That's that central part of that painting. And that's the coat of arms on the back side. But there's so much more than that.
Okay.
So we'll jump to the next slide here. This is the central part of the painting, which is King Charles is on that throne there, and he's giving the augmentation of arms paperwork to William Alexander.
Now, for the history buffs, there was two kings involved with the founding of Nova Scotia, right?
His father, King James,
Right.
initiated it, and then he passed away,
Right.
and Charles I took over. And you notice something in this photo, right off to his left, there's a little cap there. Turns out that is a Earl's, what did they call that thing? Coronet.
Coronet.
Which is like a simple crown hat.
Yeah.
And it matches his robe, because that robe he had that robe on because he was made a earl.
I remember that coronet was bugging me because I thought, why is it there? Why is it on the
It's
step?
not the king's crown.
No,
so what's it,
but he had
on
his
the
own
step?
special hat that was just for him. And look how lavish the robes are.
Oh, I
You know,
know.
I'm guessing ermine and all kinds of very fine silks and satins. I mean, it's just so ornate there.
And this is something else you pointed out. All the way around the outside are little angels.
Yes.
And if you use the cipher of Mary Queen of Scots, who was this guy's grandmother,
Right.
King Charles' grandmother, the first line of the stone says, "Oh God, send angels."
Which is in last month's
month's
episode.
show. And what you have all the way around the outside edge are a whole
Angels.
bunch of little angels. And I don't know if you noticed how it looks like they broke through a tapestry and the angels are holding it back.
Oh, no, I didn't
Yeah, I
notice that.
just-
It's sort
I
of like
just noticed that.
having a look in there.
Yeah.
I never noticed that before.
So, right above this part of the painting is happens to be a map of Nova Scotia. So let's take a look at that slide. So you'll see on here a circle, red circle, on that map. Well, that's Nova Scotia inside that circle.
It's not on the real painting, right? This is your circle.
Yeah, the circle is not on the real painting.
That would have been too easy.
What is on that real painting is there's a little X close
Yes,
to
there
Mahone
is.
Bay, and
Yes,
he
there is.
swears that's X marks the spot.
I don't think you can see it on TV, but if you take this picture and you pop it open, there's an X. And where's that X?
At Mahone Bay, we're near Oak Island. So I actually wrote the curator and said, "Can you guys take an even closer look over there?" They were finding it hard to believe,
X
but they're not
marks
as invest in.
I'm looking at it right now. There's an X there. Maybe when we do the actual editing, we could maybe do a little
Zero
zoom
in
in
on
there.
that,
Because it's there. Here's an X.
The other thing you'll notice there is that's Charles' seal hanging from it.
Okay, so we're talking about that bronze circle?
Right.
Okay, it looks like a
bottom
medallion.
here.
There's his name in there.
And then, oddly enough, right underneath the edge of the map is it looks like to be a chicken coop, or else some kind of roughly built shed or something. But I believe it's a chicken coop because it looks like the guy right next to it is chasing chickens around that got out of it. So
Free-range chickens.
yeah, free range. And the thing about this map is this is the oldest map of Nova Scotia, and the oldest is Sir William Alexander's one that he published in 1624.
Right.
Then this one came out, and King Charles, the same king that's giving him this augmentation of arms, is the one that in 1626 credited William Alexander with traveling to and surveying Nova Scotia. Now, history doesn't show anywhere that he went there, but not only did King Charles say that, but he himself said, I can remember nothing as fondly as America. Well, you can't remember it if you didn't go there. So our theory is he went there, he probably took a surveyor with him, possibly Inigo Jones, maybe his son Anthony, somebody. They did the charting of the map. He published the map in 24, yeah.
And Oak Island is all part of this.
Yes.
And as you will see in some of the vignettes, this is sort of like a YouTube video in
Yes.
painting form or advertisement of its day, because this was letting people know this is what's going on.
And you can't find this anywhere else. There are a few stray drawings of like a fort, like a diagram of a fort or whatever, but you can't find anything like this about the early days of Nova Scotia except on this painting. That's what's so cool.
And the nice thing is this once again supports everything that you've written through the course of your 10 books and our 4 episodes, that this is all information that's available, nothing that we made up, and that it directly goes back to the story in the TV show Curse of Oak Island. We are telling the story of what happened in the 1600s.
Right. And the reason we're going from this angle, at least 2 reasons, is that we're not there digging, and they've already dug 400 and some holes in that Money Pit Hill, and we don't know what they're going to find. We're not privy to that, or well, they're not even privy to what they're going to find. But the one thing that you can be sure of is that if you can develop the history behind it using basically primary sources. Most of our sources have been like the Privy Council minutes, letters, charters, things like that. Here we go with another primary source. A painting done right at the end of it. So that's why we're so excited about this, because it could tell us a lot, and we think it has. So we'll jump to the next slide here. Across the top, it was very faint on the painting, but there were a group of ships, a fleet of ships. You could barely see them, and I really enhanced the color on this slide, as you can see. And I had already in my past books decided that he had sent 17 ships. I had the names of some of them, some I didn't. Well, turns out, once you enhance this so that you can count them, there's 17 ships there, as near as I can count them.
So this is an armada that came all at once, right?
Right, it didn't. He never sent a group. Well, the biggest group he sent was 4 ships.
Okay, so this is over the period of time as they were colonizing Nova Scotia.
He sent his first in 22, didn't make it, sent another one in 23, then he sent a fleet in 28, he sent more in 29, and his last 2 that he sent were big man-of-war ships in 1630. Well, those man-of-war ships took 400 to 800 people to steer them, so when they got there, that meant there was somewhere between 800 and 1,600 people there in addition to all his colonists.
And when we say he, we're saying Sir William Alexander, who had, as you saw in the painting, here's your permission from the king. Go colonize Nova Scotia.
And what's interesting about that is that there was a poem recited, or maybe a song, sung by school kids in the even up into the 1900s, that had a rhyme in there about Sir William Alexander
really?
having 2,000 people.
Wow.
Well, if you add up 1,600 people from the ships and 400 settlers,
Yeah.
you know, it doesn't take long to get to
No, not at all.
2,000. So these things are verifying each other. So anyway, it's pretty neat to look just below the ships. You'll see there's 3 ship tenders that are making their way to shore. One of them's actually touching shore.
So a tender's like a smaller boat
Yeah,
that could come into shore where the ships can't, right?
Take 2 or 3 guys
Yeah.
in it. And then you see these guys on the shore, and at first I thought they were just scrounging like for clams or something, but then I got to wondering if they aren't all chasing chickens they got from that chicken coop. I'm not sure what they're doing, but the cool part is you see what they look like. You see the clothing they wore, and this is happening at the time, not somebody thought about it years ago. So let's just jump right to the next slide.
Okay, this one's a tricky one.
Yeah, because on the opposite side of the ships was this little map that we really could never figure out.
So now we're talking about the top right corner.
Top right corner of the painting. And it looks like a bunch of islands, and some of them are outlined as if maybe there's a charter for them or something.
Yeah.
But we've have yet to figure out where those islands are.
So if anybody's watching and these islands look familiar, let us know, because we're at a loss right now.
And the thing about it, this goes back to Edward Norgate, he would not waste that space on that canvas if that didn't mean something.
This was a pretty large area.
Yeah, he used up everything, every little nook and cranny, so he wouldn't have left us space like that just to fill space. So we still need to sort that out. It could be the islands between Scotland and Ireland, or it'd be nice to think it was Mahone Bay, but I can't find one that looks exactly like Oak
So
Island.
we still have a
there,
bit of a
but-
mystery on this.
Yeah, so we're out. The jury's out on that.
But that's the
particular-
only area I think that we really couldn't figure out.
Yeah. So moving on to the next one. On the back of my book, I have the coat of arms, and that's what's on this slide here. Well, again, I mentioned earlier, there's a beaver sitting on the top of the coat of arms. Typically, there's going to be a cross or a helmet.
Right.
On almost every coat of arms, it's a cross or helmet. Sometimes it's both. So this was really out of the ordinary, and I think it just shows how important beaver trapping was.
The pelts, they were using it for fine clothing and hats
and everything.
A lot of those top hats that was beaver pelts, as I recall. So I mean, this was a big deal in those days.
And you'll see at the bottom where the shield is, you'll see Crusader crosses, 3 of them.
Yeah.
And you can tell they are because they have a point at the bottom. And the way the Crusaders used to jam them into the ground,
Right
they'd
in
go into battle. If they lived, they'd come back and get their cross. If they didn't, they left their cross behind to mark where they died.
Now there's 2 individuals, one on each side. Can you speak to those?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's assumed, I'm pretty positive that the one on the left-hand side is a Mi'kmaq, possibly a chief. Now, there's been talk that he was actually Sagamo Seegypt, who William Alexander brought over to meet the king.
Yeah, I researched that, and
There's just no
I just couldn't find
evidence
it.
of it.
But according to the research I did do, that it is part of that nation, the Mi'kmaq.
And then on the other side's a mermaid, and I'm not sure what the significance of that is, but you'll notice the logo at the bottom, it says, or the motto, per mare per terrace. Well, that's the motto of the Clan Donald, because he was a member of, his name was really William Alexander MacDonald. He just didn't use the MacDonald all the time. So he kept that to show that he was part of that clan.
So the king blessed this
Blessed it.
coat of arms or shields and things.
You can't get any more official,
Yeah, this is right up there.
And then
Class A.
one other element on here is the crescent moon. Is it a crescent moon? That's what's the Holy Land.
Yeah.
It's on a
little slant there.
facing up, yeah. And that generally meant the Holy Land. So he has ties here to the Knights Templar in a sense. He's at least a Crusader.
And we talked about that back early on in our episodes, is that we showed that there was a connection working backwards from Freemasons to stonemasons, to the Knights Baronet who founded Nova Scotia, to the Knights Templars, where they had family lineages all the way through, right?
Yeah, that was the subject of the book Oak Island, a Masonic Conspiracy that you and I...
Right. So these ingredients are really popping out that we were right on track with all this.
And it's neat when it does that because one element will support another story, and it's constantly going in a full circle. It's one constant full circle.
You know, and that's what I like about your research, Jim, is that you just don't throw out an idea out there. You have the research and the story, the books, the references, now a painting to support what you're saying and what I'm saying, because we research together on these things.
And the reason for that is just because you can get called on the carpet for some little one-sentence statement, and you're like, well, if I'm going to, like, say, write a book, or we're going to produce a show, or I'm going to go up there to the war room and make a presentation, I better have something to back it up, because I don't want to get thrown out,
right?
You know, or whatever. So
let's go to the next one, huh?
All right. So this next slide is, you again get the attribution for this.
Thank you.
You said, gee, I wonder if those little vignettes where there's 3 different ones where men are hunting animals, and
Strange.
You thought, I wonder why they picked a specific animal for one slide and a different one for another. So the very top corner of these was
top left.
2 guys chasing some kind of animal with dogs. Well, as it turned out, I thought at first they were Greek.
I remember that.
Because he was so into Greek.
And I said, well, Jim knows more than I do, so I let it go.
But when you sent me this other photo that's on the left-hand side, or right-hand side here, there's a pretty much half-naked First Nations guy and a fully clothed European with a hat. And if you go back to the picture, there's pretty much half-naked First Nations person and a European with a hat. And they're using tools, like you think of beaver trapping with a steel trap, but they didn't have steel traps back then.
Not at all.
So they used, as the image on the right shows, they used clubs, they used spears, they used arrows. So it ties totally with that this is a beaver hunt.
Yeah.
You also found this 17th century drawing, which is great.
Not very cute, I might add.
No, but vicious.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's from the same time period is just incredible. And so in the one on the left is the original vignette. The one in the middle, I put that
Aren't you tricky? Look at that little beaver
right up there. There's an arrow pointing to it, and it's, you know, I mean, you could size it however you wanted, but that animal they're chasing could easily be a beaver, and it would tie in with these other paintings.
And we said the beaver was part of the coat of arms.
Yes.
You know, folks, when you're watching us, you think, well, these 2 guys must, sit down next to each other at home and work on these. We only see each other like now.
Yeah.
We do everything by email, text, and phone.
Did you see this?
Did you see this? I go, oh, no, and I'm watching a TV show, and my wife's going, what are you doing? I'm not worried about it. I'm doing a little research here. And so we go digging into these things, and that's what we call this rabbit hole productions, because we spent hours just going down there, but there it is. There's the 17th century beaver, and then pictures that fit right in with that vignette. So how cool is that? And
Alexander was given a commission to oversee the fur trade in 1609 and in 1611. And then when he was given the charter, it said that he had rights to all fur trapping.
Right.
And then when his son went over as the leader of these Knights Baronet, he was given a 31-year lease or whatever on all beaver trapping. So the Alexander family absolutely controlled beaver trapping in Nova Scotia, unless some First Nations or Frenchmen snuck in the back door and did it. So that's why it's so significant.
So we have consensus that the first vignette is a homage to the Alexander clan.
I believe it is.
Okay.
And especially because of the next 2.
Okay.
Because they are similar, except they're hunting a different animal.
Right.
And they're using dogs. And you can see where the top is all Strachan, and that would be Al Strachan, who was one of the earliest Freemasons, one of the earliest Knights Baronet. He was Alexander's partner. He signed the charter for Mahone Bay.
And he stole the treasure that we think possibly could have come to Oak Island.
Well, the only two charters I've been able to find, and I've searched all over, the one that's right below the name Strachan is Strachan's actual charter for his Nova Scotia land. Wow. Now, that land is now in New Brunswick, but at the time New Brunswick was part of Nova Scotia. And the other one was from Dalhousie University that's just an hour away from Oak Island.
Right.
And that was for this guy named Duncan Forbes, and that's the one in the middle at the bottom. So what else they had in similarity, besides the fact that these are the only two charters I could ever find, is the fact they were both maternally related to the Keith family.
Yeah, we found that over and over again. Yes. There was intertwining of the Keith families and the Gordons and the Douglases.
And I found a new word for that. It's called collinear.
Collinear.
Collinear cousin. So then you don't have to know if it was fifth cousin once over lightning.
You're connected. So let's talk about the vignette now. So let's talk about the Strachan one, because I think this is the one I first kind of figured out.
Well, they are chasing a stag. Mm-hmm. And
guess what?
the stag has been the symbol for the Strachan family at least since 1309, because if you go all the way to the right, that little thing, it looks like a reindeer, a little drawing, but that is actually a stamp from 1309, and that piece of metal underneath it, that is a wax mold, so they can make a wax seal to put on documents. But just to the left of that is a version of the Strachan coat of arms, and that actually comes from the book Memorials of the Family of Strachan.
And look at the dogs. They're the same kind of dogs. They're like greyhounds or something.
It's you look at the one dog on the right-hand side of the photo. It's a white dog, long and lanky, and that's what's on their coat of arms. So that, if this is real, if we can believe this theory, there's some pretty good proof.
Now, Jim, help me on this one. If I remember right, did they not find some silverware in Mahone Bay? Yep. And on this spoon or whatever it was what?
A stag.
A stag.
It was 2018, I believe, and Rick set up a meeting with this treasure hunter, and he was a legitimate. He'd been involved in $1 million operations, lost $1 million, got $1 million, whatever, and he dove on it before the treasure trove laws. It's within sight of Oak Island. And the only thing he pulled up was some silverware, and it had the stag on the handle. And he took photos down there, and he had a underwater geologist that Mel Fisher used on the Etosha.
Oh, yeah.
He looked at him, and he said that ship was built around 1600.
Wow.
And he said it can only be English or Spanish because of the trunnions on the cannons. And the problem is they passed the treasure trove law right after that, making it virtually impossible to do any treasure hunting. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people probably don't know this, but the Oak Island people dig under a law that's called the Oak Island Treasure Trove Law.
It's all their fault.
It's for them. So people don't even dig in their backyards because they'll get in trouble for it. So nobody's been able to dive on that again, but it had spoons, and I think you brought up a couple ladles and a bunch of forks that have. So
pretty cool.
Again, it's a full circle thing that I always look at it like, if this isn't connected, then it's a heck of a coincidence.
Then what is
and it's
it?
one coincidence after another. 100 different coincidences strung together to make up the story. So let's take a quick look at the Forbes.
Yeah, this was really cool too.
Hunting a bear.
You might think, so what?
Well,
but
hunting a bear with dogs. And if you look at the Forbes coat of arms, almost all of them have muzzled bears on them.
Amazing.
And a lot of them have the dogs on either side.
So what's the big deal about Forbes?
Well, number one, they actually issued his charter 2 months before all the other Knights Baronet, and they don't say on it anywhere that he's a Knights Baronet. So he was early to the game.
Wow.
And they think that maybe this is for all of Cape Breton, which is that separate island off Nova Scotia. It belongs to it, has a causeway, but it's separate. By by looking at the data on it. These things were written, a lot of them were written in Latin. Some of them were a mix of English and Latin. They're written by different people with varying degrees of handwriting. So it takes a real expert.
So the Forbes must have been wealthy. They must have been money maker or shakers here to be that important, to be one of the first, plus us discovering their coat of arms.
And if you look all the way to the lower right, this is so cool, there's a bunch of signatures on this deed.
See that.
But I isolated out William Alexander,
There he is.
our main guy, Forbes, which has to be Duncan Forbes because it's his charter, Strachan. It's
see it.
exactly
I
like
see
on
it.
his Freemason initiation.
Right.
Exactly matched to that. And the bottom name is James Philp. Well, he was the personal secretary to William Alexander.
Okay.
He signed a ton of documents, but I believe he was the father of Sir William Phipps. And I did a lot of research on that in my books, and I have a lot of reasons for it. But anyway, it's just so cool that I can actually isolate. These signatures are from May 17th, 1625.
Connecting
Over
all the dots
400.
that we've been talking about and all the players that we've mentioned. Okay, let's keep going. There's more here.
Yeah, so now we're done with the individual
On the left side.
symbologies, but we're getting into the locations. And this is really cool because you can see what people are wearing, things
Yeah,
like that.
this is really cool.
So the first one I isolated out is Gold River.
And Gold River is where?
Well, that goes from Mahone Bay, right up above Oak Island,
Okay.
right up to New Ross.
So it flows into Mahone Bay.
Yes, and
Right.
if you'll remember right, that's where Art Guinness did a lot of his walking up there, filming that road.
That's right.
That nobody knows who built that road. And they had to have a road up there because if they build an estate at the top of the hill, how would they get everything up there? You know, even if they've got the logs and the stone there. Oh, and also remember, finders keepers
That's
found
right.
all those split rocks.
That's
right
right.
up
We had
above
that
this
little
foundation.
film strip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So since this, well, what you see on the left-hand side is the long vignette. It was very long, and you couldn't really see the detail by just putting
There's
that
a
on
lot
there.
going on in that
But
picture.
it's going up a river valley.
Yeah, there's a little boat there.
So if you look at the first one, here you see a guy with a falcon
Yeah.
riding a horse. Well, guess what? Carmen Legg, I just saw it the other day, he just identified the oldest horseshoe in Nova Scotia. There aren't records of horses being in Nova Scotia in 1624.
Okay.
They didn't come till later, but they were there because there's a painting of it.
There it
and
is.
Edward Norgate was such a
Came
perfectionist.
on one of those.
He would not
those
put
ships.
it in this painting if it wasn't there.
So this would have been a gentleman's sport, right?
Yes, and he may have been doing it for game too, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you see just behind him a man shooting possibly at ducks,
Yeah.
I would think. And then you see two people fishing. So they're engaged in trying to get food, but they also are enjoying their occupation.
It
or
almost
their-
looks like there's a woman holding a fish there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty cool. A little bridge there. Okay.
And then if you just skip to the middle, they have this wonderful little structure there that they're having a nice dinner under.
It's
And
like a
look at
little
all the people.
gazebo
It's like
or
a Thanksgiving dinner
Yeah.
under there.
Somebody carrying looks like cakes and all kind of, and a little dog there.
And then people are spread out, talking, conversing, you know, and then there's another guy riding a horse.
Yeah.
That's two horses in this photo. And yet there aren't supposed to be any horses in
And another
Nova
river.
Scotia at this
Another a boat going up a little
yeah.
river.
And so I'm thinking that last boat, that's probably a very small, they call them a panace. They only have one mast.
Okay.
And I'm figuring he's either going down river or up river on Gold River.
Yeah.
And I did find out from a gentleman that it used to be navigable until
Okay.
they started gold mining, and then it spread it out. And
Hence the name Gold River.
yes, and if you look right in the center of that painting, it looks like a stone bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like something up behind her. It gets so blurry at this point because you got to imagine this is blown up
Right.
100 times the size it was. But it isn't too far-fetched to think that he's heading up or down Gold River right there. So that's one of our locations. And the next location is of interest because it was the whole gist of this book, Oak Island and New Ross. It was that the Alexander family built the estate on the big hill, 20 miles or 17 miles. The estimates vary, but right up above Oak Island, and there is still a foundation there that was dug up in the 80s, I believe, 70s and 80s. And so here you see the vignette shows a castle-like building there with a hip roof building off to the right of it, with a little chimney.
And then these some guys are really busy
Keep
down
that hip
below.
roof, keep that hip
Keep it in
roof in mind. Down below, they're working on cannons. It appears they're working on cannons, but you'll see a mill.
Yes, there it is, right on the right.
And there's a tunnel.
There is.
Well, what did Finders Keepers tell us? That they found a bunch of tunnels on the property next to the Harris property.
And on Oak Island, there's all kinds of tunnels.
So, this picture in the top corner, this was a drawing that was found underneath another picture in a frame. And it was a family who had the legend in their family that they used to work at the New Ross estate. They helped build it. And it has several of the same elements of the Norgate painting, including the little hip-roofed building right on the same side of the tower. And it almost looks like there might be a chimney there. It's kind of jumbled there. But, and then if you go down to the lower left, lower right, that is some rough sketching that Joan Harris Hope did when she was doing her excavating. And what do you see at the bottom? A river, and you see the word mills.
I do.
And this has a mill in it. And it's in the same position from the castle.
Castle Hilltop?
Yes, castle at the top. In fact, she even wrote Stone Hilltop and Circle City.
And this was supposed to be the center of the Alexander colony, right, of Nova Scotia. This was going to be like headquarters.
Well, he lived in London near a place called Charing Cross, and that point is what they call the notional point of London. It isn't the center. It's called the notional center. It's not the center, but it's where they measure every distance to any other town or any other country or anything to London. That's where they measure from. He named his estate Charing Cross.
Wow.
So I believe that he intended that to be the notional center of Nova Scotia. Because it's pretty hard with a country as long as Nova Scotia is, compared to how wide it is. How would you find center? Pretty hard. So this is up a hill. And so that would be something naturally you do. You try to go to one of the highest points. Might not be the highest, but you try to go to one of the highest points where you can see around, pick a point there and say, this is the center, notional center of Nova Scotia.
You know, when we had Sir William Alexander on in our third episode, I think these paintings really represent his vision. Clean water, clean countryside, farming and hunting and plenty of fresh air and people being happy, where the conditions in Scotland and the British Isles was pretty bad.
Yeah, he even wrote about it, how desperate they were. He said it's come down to either fishing or fighting to survive. And this was a wide open land, all the game animals we saw. So, and he also wanted to get away from, there were plagues, there were a lot of political fights going on like crazy, and he wanted it to be a utopia. And he wrote about it in utopian terms. In fact, he said something like, there will be a new Typhus who led the Argonauts, and there will be a new ship, Argo. And he was saying, I am going to be that guy that starts a utopia over there. And he wasn't the only one, because Bacon wanted to do it too.
Francis
And he wrote the book New Atlantis. It was all about a utopia.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, very clearly, yeah.
And that Sir William Vaughan, which another friend of his, he had land in Newfoundland, and that was his goal too.
And we talk about what, Gorges? He went down to South America?
What is it, Vilgenaut?
You're right, yeah.
And he even wrote about it, that he wanted to create this utopia. And
so it was on people's minds to do this sort of thing.
And probably they were in a battle of who can be first, who can get the first utopia. So
I think we got one more piece to go here.
Oh yes, and this is going to be the most exciting.
All right, here we go.
Are you ready?
I'm seatbelt on.
Oak Island.
Okay.
So we've heard, because of different archaeological finds they've made about various things that they feel were on Oak Island. They know for a fact because they have photos of the trees that were out on Isaac's Point. And if you notice in the photo, a bunch of trees with very few limbs at the bottom, all at the top, out on a point of land.
Mm-hmm.
If you look, another thing they talked about was repairing ships.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you look out on the coast there, you see a ship pulled up into the sand.
How many weeks did we see wood things in parts of ships, right?
And they even had that runway where you pull the boat up. Remember they found
and some of the tools? Yeah, absolutely.
And so that could have been pulled up on it.
Mm-hmm.
And you see what they talked about, a tar kiln.
Yep.
And there's this guy in the middle there. He's either running a tar kiln or he's forging.
He's doing something. Yeah.
You
something
have a couple guys splitting logs. Now that could be for tunneling.
Definitely.
It could be repairing the ship.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they would have split them to fire up the forge. So they probably would have split them either for
planking
or for tunneling.
Yeah.
And my favorite, which I'm probably really dreaming about this one, this guy
I know where you're going.
in the middle right.
What's he carrying?
He looks like he's carrying a treasure chest.
Of course he is.
And we're just going to, that's our story, and we're going to stick to it. That he's carrying a treasure chest. Now, what he's carrying, we don't know.
Right.
But the beauty of all of this is that the Norgate painting is an absolute gold mine, because like you said, it's like they took a Polaroid camera with them, and they took all these photos, and there's nothing else like it anywhere for, not even for the Virginia colony. There's nothing like this for anywhere. And so what's cool about it is they got it back to Audley End. I think I know the story behind it, but I don't want to upset anybody by telling it. But they got it back, and so I sent him a copy of the book. I said, "Would you like a copy of the book to put on a little easel right next to the page?" He said, "Yeah, sure." Please send
very
it. So
cool.
I signed it, and so as far as I know, it sits there. And now the painting is back where it belongs, and it's hung there.
Super.
Oh, and guess who built Audley Inn?
I have no idea.
Another Thomas Howard.
Really?
A cousin, a cold in ear
my
cousin
gosh.
to our Thomas Howard that we've been talking about during all these shows.
Okay.
So I found all this little by little. You helped me find a lot of it, and you know how that goes. You piece it together, you're trying to make a story out of it. And so this slide shows my book. And with all the guesses and by gollies, the star charts, the geometric drawings, the theoretical legends, there's nothing like what we're doing.
Not at all.
We are finding primary sources that present tangible, pragmatic history, and we're doing it one subject at a time, which is what I love, because we're not the MTV version of Oak Island. We are the down and dirty, dig it up
Researchers.
from the books.
So we're going to continue to dig.
Yes.
We're going to continue to tell the story as you have presented in your books, and we discover things all the time.
Yeah, so we have so much left on the cutting room
I
floor.
know. So we encourage you to stay tuned, because we're going to be doing more of these as we go along. I think we kind of came to the end of the day, huh?
Yeah, and next month I thought we might, because Oak Island's going to start in November. I have a ton of pictures of me being on the island. I could give somewhat of a background,
I think
a
people would like
backstage pass type
Perfect.
thing to Oak Island, and because all those photos have a little story with them. It wasn't just a random, "Can I get my photo with you?" Something was going on when somebody took the photo. So I thought maybe we'd do that next week
do it.
or next month to gear up for the first show.
Time. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our show today, and I want to do a special thanks to Randy and Jackie, who are our backup people here at Innovative Studios at Lakeshore Center for the Arts here in Westfield, New York. I'm Doc Hamels, and
Jim McQuiston.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
This is Robert Clotworthy, and you have been listening to Oak Island Plus, a discussion of Oak Island and other mysteries from around the world. Be sure to catch every episode.